So Julie Roys continues to bring out stories coming against John MacArthur and the way that he has handled different situations. And it's interesting to see how different people are responding on the internet, depending on kind of where they're coming from, what their biases are. I think you can see definitely a lot of people's biases coming out. And in this video, I really wasn't sure how much I wanted to even talk about this, but I thought, well, maybe I could just say something here that hopefully will be of some help, or at least it will express my opinion about a lot of these things that are happening right now, a lot of the talk that's going on. And really the main point that I want to make in this video, and it's something we all struggle with because we all have our backgrounds and our biases and our experiences, but it's just a plea for fairness. And what I mean by that is just, that we need to be very concerned with making sure that we're as fair as possible when we assess situations, especially from the outside. If we were not really involved in that situation, it's easy for us, and especially in the social media world, we can make assessments about things that we really don't have inside information about. We really weren't there. But because the information is out there and it spreads so freely, we a lot of times give our opinions about these things. And one of the things I really wanted to point out here is about Julie Roys herself. I want to make clear before I say this too that I don't try to defend Pastor John MacArthur in everything that he does. And, there have been times on this channel that I've disagreed with him, and I've talked about that. But at the same time, I do want to mention here that Julie Roys, according to Twitter here, it says that she is reporting the truth, restoring the church. She's a Christian investigative journalist, author, and podcaster. But what I find interesting is just the way that she talks about certain things. For example, on Twitter here, back in March, she posted this. It appears John MacArthur has been removed as a speaker from Ligonier 2022. Screenshot on the left is from February 16th, 2022. On the right, taken today. Accountability likely won't come from within Grace Community Church. It must come from the larger evangelical community. So what she's posting here is that, according to her, John MacArthur has been removed from the Ligonier conference. Now, she does say here, she uses a qualifier word, it appears that he has been removed. And I've noticed this with her, and I'll show you another tweet where she uses qualifier words so that she can make kind of a conjecture about something. But by putting that qualifier word in there, if someone says, well, why did you say that? She can say, well, I didn't say it happened. I just said it appeared to happen. So she's saying it appears that he's been removed as a speaker. And then in another tweet, she says, for the record, I do not know why MacArthur has vanished from the conference. I have reached out to Ligonier but have not heard back. So that's one tweet. I want to show you another one, though, that this is the next day, and it's on the same topic, but she says it this way now. In the wake of scandal involving his apparent promotion of convicted child abuser and the shaming of the abuser's wife, John MacArthur has pulled out of the Ligonier 2022 conference. So again, you see here a qualifier word, his apparent promotion of a convicted child abuser. She's not technically saying that he did do this. She's just saying it's apparent that he may have done this. And then she says that in light of what's happening with this scandal, he is pulled out of the Ligonier 2022 conference. However, when you look further, she does have the article here that she's linking to. You find out that as they looked into this more, he pulled out of the conference. So the initial tweet made it sound like maybe he was removed from the conference because of his scandal. Now it's clear that no, he actually canceled himself. But when they looked into this more, there was another conference right around that time period where it says he also canceled that appearance due to family health issues, it says here. So what I'm saying in all of this is that Julie Roys, as she's reporting, she says she's reporting the truth, but in reality here, she's putting statements out there on Twitter that are implying that John MacArthur is not a part of conferences because of a scandal, when in reality, from the information that we're seeing, it's actually because of family health issues that he decided to clear his schedule. So I really think as we're assessing situations, and again, this is not to defend everything that John MacArthur has ever done, but it's just to have a recognition that Julie Roys is very skewed a lot of times in how she presents things. And one of the things that can be really tricky or confusing is that she says she's being a journalist, but when it comes to the way that she reports things, I would actually classify her more as maybe someone who's like a defense attorney. And if you're in a courtroom and you have a defense attorney, you know the defense attorney has an agenda, and you know that they do have bias in the way they're presenting things. And the prosecutor also has a certain vantage point and bias to the way that they're presenting things. And that's fine in the court system to have those two sides given. But the jury, the people that are looking at the case, are supposed to be impartial. They're supposed to try to look at all of the sides. The problem is that Julie Roys presents herself as just being an objective reporter who's looking at all the sides. But in reality, the way that I see her positioning herself and the way that she communicates, she is definitely taking a side on things. And I think that you can see even the way that she posted those tweets, the way that she talks about things, it is from a certain kind of skewed perspective, or a slant to it might be a better way to put it. And that comes out. She's not really sure why MacArthur pulled out of the conferences, and yet last month she kind of conjectured that it had to do with the scandal. So in light of everything I'm saying here, there was another thing I thought would be encouraging and helpful to look at, again, just to try to be fair in how we look at everything. You would think, based on everything that Julie Roys has reported, that John MacArthur and Grace Community Church and the Masters Seminary don't care about victims of abuse and don't care about protecting people. That's the impression you get from the way that she has reported. But I noticed this. This is just kind of a coincidence that I happened to see this church website the other day. This is from a church in London called Grace Life London. And it talks about this church's background. It says that Grace Life London is a new church in central London planted out of Grace Community Church, pastored by John MacArthur in California, USA. The pastors, Tim Dryan, Ross Orgill, and Adam Waller, are men trained at the Masters Seminary and served in the church there before returning to London to establish Grace Life London in January of 2011. So these are men who clearly were involved in Grace Community Church's ministry, were trained at the Masters Seminary. And you would get the impression from Julie Roys that the way that people coming out of institutions like this, the way that they're thinking is that they're not protective of people who are vulnerable or who have been victims of abuse. And yet, right on their website, if you look under the About section here, they have this safeguarding policy. And this is fascinating. It says, as a leadership, we recognize the need to provide a safe and caring environment for children, young people, and vulnerable adults. We acknowledge that these groups can be victims of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse and neglect. As such, we adopted the procedures set out in our safeguarding policy in accordance with statutory guidance. When did they put this policy in place? When they started the church in 2011. And then it says this document was last reviewed and updated in July 2017. So this policy that they instituted to protect people, to protect vulnerable people, and to acknowledge the potential for abuse, this policy was instituted years before Julie Roys ever was reporting on anything to do with John MacArthur and Grace Community Church. And these are men that were trained at the Masters Seminary. So I wanted to share that with you just to give some broader perspective and to show that I think people are, I believe, getting a certain impression based on the way that Julie Roys is reporting. And I'm just not really sure that that's fair, because she definitely has a bias and an agenda. And I know that some people are going to react to what I'm saying because I'm pleading for fairness, and they're going to say, well, what about the victims? Don't they deserve fairness? Absolutely. Getting back to that court scenario, that court analogy, they do deserve fairness, but listening to the defense attorney doesn't always give you the whole picture, and that's why you have to have the prosecution, the defense, as well as the impartial jury. And for those of us looking on the outside, all I'm saying is we should try to be as impartial as possible. And of course, we pray for God to bring his justice. Obviously, in the David Gray situation, he ended up going to jail. So for those who think that, there was something that should have happened to him, something did happen to him. And again, I'm looking at this from the outside. I don't really know for sure every single thing that happened. But when it comes to fairness, looking from the outside, we have to make sure we understand the biases of different people that are looking at a situation. And especially someone like Julie Roys, we have to be careful because she's saying that she's just this reporter investigating the truth. But I think it's evident that she's had biases. And something that is pertinent to all of this, by the way, is something that she just posted on Twitter less than a day ago as I'm reporting this. She says, recently I've been confronted for a story I share in my book, Redeeming the Feminine Soul. The critique has been hard, but I realize I need to own some things publicly. Below is the link to my statement. Thank you to those who lovingly helped me realize my error. Now, I do appreciate that she's being humble about this and acknowledging something she needs to correct. And I think that's to be commended. But what it really comes down to here, when you look at this statement, she says at the end here, I've pulled my book from my website and Facebook page and have initiated conversations with my publisher about next steps. And what I believe this has to do with is actually a story she shares in this book that she now regrets the way that she told this story, that it was not really correct in the way that she presented things. And someone pointed out actually on Jason Whittaker's channel, Dear Woke Christian, he had a guest on, and I happened to hear this. The guest said, if she can't even get her own story right, then how do we trust her with other people's stories? It was something like that. And I thought that was a really, really excellent point. Again, it doesn't mean that everything Julie Roys is saying is wrong and that there aren't things that Grace Community Church has needed to look at, and have they handled everything well in the past. But I think you can see from what I've said here, Julie Roys does have bias. She seems to evidence that in the way that she writes. She's not always correct in the way that she presents things. But also, Grace Community Church, we see evidence of a church plant that really came from Grace Community Church that is very concerned with protecting victims of abuse and vulnerable individuals, which is really wonderful. And I think that kind of shows you the broader picture of the whole situation. And I hope the way that I'm presenting things, even if I'm not perfect in the way that I present it, I hope that it helps pull us all in the direction of trying to be fair in how we assess situations. It's especially difficult when someone is talking about something very emotional. And I noticed that Julie Roys didn't gain a lot of traction when she attacked MacArthur in other areas. She didn't gain as much traction when she talked about other issues. But when she talked about particularly issues of abuse, that really gained a lot of traction. It's a very emotional issue, and it's hard for us to be objective about that. Also, one thing I want to close with here in talking about all this is to reiterate again that, of course, we need to be very protective of people that are vulnerable, that are victims of abuse. We need to help them, support them. We need to make sure that we're not too quick to dismiss people. We need to make sure we really listen, because certainly there are a lot of people out there that have had horrible things happen to them, and we need to love them and be supportive, care for them, pray for them, do everything we can to help them. But ultimately, I think what we all want is for people to be healed, people to be forgiven of their sin, people to be able to move forward in the joy and the peace and the forgiveness that God provides. So I've talked quite a bit here, just giving my opinion, but I hope you get the main point. It's really just a plea for fairness as we look at situations like this and as we deal with our brothers and sisters in Christ. I hope this was helpful in some way. I'd love to hear any thoughts you have in the comment section below. But thank you so much for taking some time to listen to some of my thoughts here, brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.